Good evening. Tonight we're going to discuss web server hardware and software. And this is our 8th lecture in this particular course. In this lecture we'll cover web server basic functionality, web server operating systems and server software, email issues, utility programs, hardware and cloud options that are available for running an e-commerce site. So, client-server architectures are used in LANs, WANs, and the web. Server computers have more memory and larger, faster disk drives than the client computers that they serve. Web browsers are a type of web client software. You have platform neutrality, and that is the ability of a network to connect devices using different operating systems. This is critical in the widespread web acceptance because it allows many different platforms to work together. The web server's main job is to respond to web client requests. The main elements are hardware, operating system software, and web server software. Static page is an unchanging page retrieved from stored web server files. A dynamic page creation is a response to a user request. Customized pages give the user an interactive experience. A client-side scripting software operates on the web client, in other words the browser, and changes the web page display in response to a user's actions. And JavaScript and Adobe Flash are widely used for that. Server-side scripting programs run on a web server, and they actually create web pages in response to a request for specific information from a web client. Software tools to create dynamic web pages include Microsoft's ASP.NET, PHP, the Apache Software Foundation Hypertext Preprocessor, and Adobe Cold Fusion. AJAX, which is asynchronous JavaScript and XML, creates an interactive website that looks like an application. Ruby on Rails, Scala, and Python are scripting languages that are used to accomplish the same objectives. Many websites use more than one language or development framework to accomplish their objectives. Multiple meanings of server. A server is any computer providing files or making programs available to other computers connected to it through a network. Server software makes files and programs available. For example, an email server handles incoming and outgoing email. A database server runs database management software. A transaction server runs accounting and inventory management software. A server describes several types of computer hardware and software, and the context is needed to determine the exact meaning. Some of the architectures for web client server operation. The web browser requests files from a web server and uses the internet as the transportation medium. The request is formatted by the browser using a protocol known as HTTP, and this is sent to the server computer. The server receives the request, retrieves the requested web page file, formats it using HTTP, the response, and sends the response back to the client over the internet. The client web computer displays the page, and it's a repeating process of request, response, display. Web pages with graphics can be slow, because each page element requires a separate request and response. The basic model is a two-tier client-server architecture, one client and one server computer. A request message is the web client message sent to request files from a web server that consist of three major parts. The message contains the request line, that contains the command, the target name, the protocol name, and the version number. Optional request headers contain file type information that the client accepts so that the server can return only those. And there's also an optional entity body that is used to pass bulk information back to the server. A server receiving a request message executes the command included in the message. It can retrieve web pages from disk and create a response message to send back to the client. The response header line indicates the server HTTP version, the response status, and a status information explanation. A response header field returns information describing the server's attributes. The entity body contains the HTML page requested by the client machine. A three-tier architecture allows additional processing before the server responds to the client's request. Often it includes databases and related software applications that supply information to the web server. An N-tier architecture have more than three tiers. For example, you can track customer purchases that are stored in shopping carts, look up sales tax rates, keep track of customer preferences, update in-stock inventory databases, and keep your product catalog current. Operating systems for web servers. Operating system tasks include running programs, allocating computer resources to programs, and providing input and output services. It's required for a computer to run programs. Larger system responsibilities include tracking multiple users and ensuring these users don't interfere with each other in their sharing of the computer. Web server operating systems software run on Microsoft Windows server products or Linux or Unix-based operating systems. Some companies consider Microsoft operating systems simpler to use than Unix-based systems. There are some concerns about security weaknesses caused by the tight integration of Microsoft products. Linux is an open source, fast, efficient, and easy to install operating system. It can be downloaded free from the web, but most companies buy it through a commercial distributor for the additional utilities and support they get. Some examples are Red Hat and SUSE Linux Enterprise. Oracle sells web server hardware with its Unix-based operating system Solaris installed. Web server software. Commonly used programs are Apache HTTP server and Microsoft Internet Information Server, also known as IIS. Some businesses, such as Google, wrote their own web servers. Apache has been the dominant web server software since 1996. It's free and user-supported with lots of services available. Microsoft IIS is bundled with Microsoft Windows Server, and it runs only on Windows systems. It's used on many intranets, and small and large sites have adopted it as a standard. IIS is free, but the OS it comes with can be quite expensive. And here we see the platform neutrality of the web. You've got Android and Apple iOS devices connecting through it, Windows and Linux and Macintosh PCs, and then you've got, of course, Windows Server, Solaris, and Linux servers, and even IBM mainframes connecting through it. Here's a message flow in a two-tier client-server network. An HTTP request is made and it's sent to the internet. It's received by the web server that formulates a response. The response is sent to the internet, and finally the response makes its way back to the web client. Here we see a three-tier flow of information. And again, the message is an HTTP request to the internet. That comes to the web server. The web server will then make reference to various other servers, database servers, transaction processing systems, financial transaction processing systems, which in turn send the information back to the web server that collates it all into an HTTP response sent to the internet and eventually back to the originating client. And we see the percent of websites that use major web server software products as of 2015. You've got 50% of the sites use Apache, 18% use other softwares, 8% use the Google web server, 14% use Nginx, and then only 10% use Microsoft IIS. Email is used to gather information, conduct transactions, and perform electronic commerce tasks. The reason people originally were attracted to the internet was email. It conveys messages in seconds with attachments. Often that's the most important part of the message. And even today it's the most popular form of business communication. The drawbacks include the time spent answering emails, and that can be burdensome and take 2 hours a day or so. Email attachments can be, or they can contain, a computer virus. But the most frustrating and expensive problem is spam. In 2009, the peak year for spam, one 24-hour period showed 220 billion spam emails were sent. That's just in one day. Spam growth has leveled off, and legal and technical solutions will continue to reduce it. The benefits reaped by spammers still make it attractive. Reducing spam is going to require passing laws and some technical changes in the internet mail handling systems. Approaches under existing laws and technologies require cooperation from organizations. However, some tactics can still be taken by the email users. Some of the individual user anti-spam tactics. One thing is using a complex email address, and that reduces the chance that a spammer can automatically generate it. The downside is that a complex address can be hard to remember. Control your email exposure is another tactic. Spammer software robots search for email addresses on discussion boards, in chat rooms, other online sources that use email. Use multiple email addresses. Switch to another if the spammers have infested the one you're currently using. And use filtering techniques based on contents. Content filtering techniques differ in terms of content elements examined, spam indications, and how strictly message classification rules are applied. Basic content filters examine email headers. Client-level filtering is at your individual user computer, and server-level filtering is by the mail server computers. There's a blacklist spam filter that looks for known spammers in the incoming messages from address. Likewise, there's a whitelist spam filter that looks for good senders in the from address. However, there are high false positive rates with the whitelist spam filters. A challenge and response content filtering compares all incoming messages to a whitelist. If the sender is not on the whitelist, an automated email response, in other words a challenge, is sent. The challenge asks the sender to reply to the email, a response. The reply must contain a response to a challenge presented in the email. It's designed so humans can respond easily. And you can get more information from the Carnegie Mellon University website, their CAPTCHA project site. Advanced content filtering looks for spam indicators in the entire email message. Once an indicator is identified, the email message's spam score is raised. Indicator types are words, word pairs, certain HTML codes, and information about where the word occurs. Spammers are adjusting what they do, and often they'll stop including these defined indicators. A Bayesian revision statistical technique uses additional knowledge to revise earlier probability estimates. Naive Bayesian filter software allows users to review messages and indicate if the message is spam or not spam. Software gradually learns to identify spam and is correct about 95% of the time after training. And here we see spam as a proportion of all business email. And of course, 2009 was the worst year when about 95% of all business email was spam. These days it's trending down to about 50% of all business email is spam. And here's an example of a CAPTCHA challenge that is sent to make sure that you're not being sent emails from a spammer. So let's look at supporting our website for e-commerce. Some of the legal solutions. In January 2004, the U.S. CAN spam law went into effect. Spam decreased for the first 2 months, but returned to previous levels after there was no threat of federal prosecution. It prohibits misleading email message address header information, deceptive subject headers, and transfer of email addresses. Some spammers have been prosecuted, fined, and even received jail time. However, many use servers outside of the United States, and so we enter into jurisdictional issues with that. Legal solutions have had only limited success. It's expensive to prosecute spammers. Some of the technical solutions. One of the problems is the Internet design did not include mechanisms ensuring the email sender identity would be known to the recipient. The Internet's communication protocol, designed to be a polite set of rules where the sending computer waits for acknowledgement that the message was received. And this can be used to advantage. The originating computer will slow if the acknowledgement is delayed. It must continue to scan for that acknowledgement and will not send more messages until the acknowledgement is received. The defending or receiving computer must develop a way to identify computers sending spam and then delay acknowledgement. A computer being spammed can also launch a return attack called tear grubbing or a tar pit. Send an email message back to the suspected spamming computer with the objective of setting a trap that drags down its ability to send spam. However, there are concerns that the counterattack might violate laws. The ultimate spam solution could come from new email protocols providing absolute verification for email message source. Currently, the most effective solutions have been coordinated efforts to identify and block spammers. Website utility programs. TCP/IP supports a number of utility programs or tools. They run on the web server or on client programs. Email was the earliest internet utility program and still continues to be the most important utility. A key element in electronic commerce strategies is email. A Tracer-T is another utility program, and it sends data packets to every computer on the path between one computer and another and clocks the packet's round-trip times. This provides an indication of the time the message needs to travel from one computer to another and back. It ensures remote computers are online and pinpoints data traffic congestions points. It calculates and displays the number of hops between computers and the time to traverse the entire path one way. Telnet and FTP are some other utilities. Telnet program allows a person using one computer to access files and run programs on a second computer connected to the internet. File Transfer Protocol, or FTP, is the part of the TCP/IP rules that define formats used to transfer files between TCP/IP connected computers. Search engines and indexing programs are important elements of many web servers. When a browser requests a website search, this search engine compares the index terms to the requester's search terms to find matching documents. Data analysis software. Web servers capture visitor information and place it in a web log file that grows quickly. Third-party web log file analysis programs summarize information in the file. Popular web log file analysis programs include Adobe Analytics, Google Analytics, and Web Trends. Line checking utilities look for dead links. Dead links will display an error message rather than a web page when clicked. Sites with many dead links are said to have link rot. Link checker utilities examine each site page and report URLs that no longer exist. They identify orphan files, which are files on a web server not linked to a page. They also include script checking and HTML validation. Adobe Dreamweaver includes line checking program functionality. Freestanding link checking programs include LSAP, Link Scan, and Links Cop. remote server administration. Website administrators control the website from any internet-connected computer if they can do so with the remote server administration capability. From any computer connected to the internet, they can monitor server activity and manipulate the server from wherever the administrator happens to be. LabTech software includes remote administration, link checking, HTML troubleshooting, site monitoring, and other utility programs. It's useful in managing the operations on the web. And here we see a screen capture of a tracer T going out to a particular site and the path it takes to get from the client to the server and the times for each one of those hops. So let's talk about web server hardware. There's a wide variety of computer brands, types, sizes that are used by organizations to host their online operations. Small companies run websites on desktop PCs. Most online business operations are operated on computers designed for site hosting. Businesses select specific hardware and software elements based on the site's functionality, expected visitors, number and size of pages, and graphics. Server computers generally have more memory, larger and faster hard disk drives, and faster processors than typical desktop computers. Many server computers use multiple processors. Most companies spend $2,000 to $50,000 on an individual web server, with large organizations spending millions on server hardware. They may be housed in freestanding cases, but most are installed in equipment racks. Blade servers are servers on a card, and they're small in size, and you can stack 300 of them in a single 6-foot rack. Web servers and green computing, significant electrical power needs to be provided for operating servers and cooling the room where the servers are housed. Green computing is a set of efforts to reduce the environmental impact of large computing installations. Evaluating web server performance. Benchmarking is testing to compare hardware and software performance. It includes many elements: hardware, operating system software, server software, connection speed, user capacity, type of web pages delivered, and connection bandwidth. User servers can handle important and hard to measure processes, and that's where benchmarking can help you discern how well your particular server is operating. A throughput is the number of HTTP requests that the hardware and software process in a unit of time. Response time is the server time required to process one request. And of course, there are independent testing and benchmarking services available. Web server hardware architectures. Electronic commerce websites use a tiered architecture to divide the work of serving web pages. They may use one or more computers within each tier. Server farms are large collections of servers lined up row after row. A centralized architecture uses a few expensive, fast computers and is more sensitive to technical problems. Requires adequate backup plans. A distributed architecture or a decentralized architecture uses many less powerful, less expensive computers, spreads the risk over a large number of servers, and requires additional hubs or switches to connect servers to each other and the internet. Requires the cost of load balancing to assign the workload efficiently among the servers. A load balancing switch is network hardware that monitors server workloads and assigns incoming web traffic to the server with the most available capacity. Simple load balancing system traffic enters through the site's router and encounters the load balancing switch, which directs the traffic to the best web server. More complex load balancing systems look at incoming traffic from the web directed to groups of dedicated web servers, groups that are organized by specific functions. The cost of load balancing systems range from about $2,000 for a simple solution to $15,000 to $20,000 up to $40,000 for complex solutions. Cloud computing is an option to reduce costs and efforts that many businesses encounter, and many businesses are outsourcing the entire network by using this cloud computing option. Allows multiple organizations to share a network of servers and software, giving businesses access to computers, storage, and backup at a lower cost. Sometimes called infrastructure as a service, IaaS, or sometimes as platform as a service, or PaaS. Resources can be allocated dynamically as they're needed. Some larger firms use hybrid cloud computing. They move large volume routine work to a cloud provider and maintain more sensitive data and processes internally. Content delivery networks. Latency occurs when a transmission delay is caused by a network inability to handle full traffic load. This is a problem for businesses that rely on the internet to deliver large audio and video files to customers. To prevent latency, online businesses have turned to content delivery networks. This is a service that stores large file content on multiple servers throughout the internet for a fee. A large file requests are routed to the nearest server with a stored copy of the file, and that way you are not bogging down one server with all the requests, and it's not going across the entire network in your particular region. You have multiple paths. Here we see a picture of a rack-mounted blade server for an internet site. And here we see the centralized and decentralized web architectures, and you can see obviously there is additional costs for the distributed architecture for the routers that connect them to and the computer blades that run them on the server farm. Here's a basic load balancing system. Comes through the router to a load balancing switch, and the load balancing switch will look at the server that has the least workload, and it will route the traffic to that one. Here's a complex load balancing system. This is where you get the additional cost for routers and hub switches when you are going to route traffic to specific groups of servers based on the functionality that they're going to be supporting. And cloud, here's a graphic, a pie chart of the cloud computing global market share. We see Amazon Web Services at 28%, Microsoft Cloud at 10%, Google Cloud and IBM Cloud 7 and 8%, and a lot of others are lumped together at 40%. But it shows that Amazon is still one of the main leaders in this field. Here we see the growth of internet traffic, and it's projected through 2019, and it has been growing very steadily. It almost has the convex look of an exponential growth. And that's the end of our lecture. See you in the forums. Good evening.